Today we want to talk about why we go through what we go through. Connect is a relationship series, but sometimes we disconnect our experience with the potential of helping others. And really our pain is a connection point that when we're going through things, it's meant to bring encouragement to others through empathy and connection. So shall we begin? Let's establish this. God allows pain and weakness to produce humility and power. I'll say that again. God allows pain and weakness to produce humility and power. The great apostle Paul, at a time in his life that he could not get free of some suffering and pain, which is left mysteriously unknown in Scripture. He writes, "So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being conceited." Now, wow. He's saying God allowed him, in fact, even gave him a thorn, which no scholar agrees on what that is, a physical malady, persecution from people. But he said, this thorn was given to prevent him from becoming proud, which he very much was before he came to Christ. 3 times he says, "I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me, but he said to me," referring to the Lord, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." So we get this. How many of us want God's power? His power comes through the conduit of our weakness, which tells you why God will allow seasons of weakness in our lives. "Therefore," he says, "I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content." Wow. He didn't settle because he kept praying for healing. "I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities, for when I am weak, then I am strong." So listen to Paul. He says, God deliver me, God heal me, God bless me. But God wasn't doing it. God had done it in so many other areas of his life, but he was confounded by this thorn. The thorn, referring, that word means something that's annoying and irritating and painful. How many of you have thorns in your life? Not thorns at your side, but thorns in your life. Things that God hasn't just removed from you yet. And you're going, I would be so much better as a husband or a wife or a son or an employee or a boss if God just would relieve me of this agitation. That's what Paul was praying. But he came to the place of being content while believing for breakthrough and understanding God was in control. He went, wait, I think God is doing something in me, and he wants to do something through me. So instead of grumbling about it, he says, I'm going to use it. Huge. So let me give you some statements. Our success leaves an impression on others. If you're a basketball fan, it's the NBA season. Doesn't LeBron James leave an impression on you? How many of you? Okay, women are going, LeBron who? What brand is that? Okay. No one here, men know who LeBron James is, the great athlete, but no one here has a connection to LeBron James. I cannot relate to him. See, and God is all about relationships. On the other hand, our struggles form a connection to others and with others. We usually connect at the point of our pain. Don't you get close to people who suffer like you, who understand you, who get you? See, that's a normal thing that occurs. Prior to becoming a believer in Jesus, Paul was arrogant. He was brilliant, but he was also self-confident and self-reliant. Not much we know about him. He didn't have great relationships because he was the one-package guy, but he had a great relationship with the Roman Empire. And he had cahoots with them to put believers either in prison or to death. This is the great apostle Paul who wrote 13 or 14 of the book, 27 books in the New Testament. So God in his mercy and grace, confounding our logic, selects a believer killer to pen most of the theology we find in the New Testament. But Paul had to become weak before he became strong. And after coming to Christ, pain humbled him and connected him to God truly in a relationship with the Lord and to others. Because Paul was a guy who didn't need nobody. He was a genius. He was brilliant. He had power. He had wealth. He had control. And he had connection with the people that were bringing persecution to Christ followers. So that is a foundation. We move on. God desires, watch this now. That's the blank all the melancholies are looking at right now. Tell me that word. Tell me that word. Okay. God desires that afflictions create bonds of connection or bonds of connection. Afflictions, that's a word we don't like to hear. Look at what he pens here in 2 Corinthians. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction. Afflictions are a part of life in this fallen world. Because we come to Christ does not mean God removes them from us. In fact, sometimes he'll use them to draw us closer to himself. So that, big word, we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's suffering, so through Christ we shall abundantly in comfort too. Empathy is the entry into connection with people. Empathy, feeling with, feeling for. Empathy, putting yourself in their place, putting yourself in their shoes, an intentional choice to identify the best you can with the trials and tribulations of what others are going through, or life as they are experiencing, which is for most of us less than ideal. I pray for Senator Harimoto every day, many times a day. This is my hero, Senator Harimoto, who doctors have said, you have X amount of months to live. Well, the first time he beat that, and the second time he's beating that. And I'm going to pray as much as I can for Senator Breen Harimoto, as his Grace Group does, as his family does. But in the meantime, Senator Harimoto serves our city. He does not sit around feeling sorry for himself, blaming God for why he has pancreatic cancer. That is the great faith God is pleased with. Because in his suffering, he has brought tremendous influence to legislators. I know this because I did recently the Bible study with a number of them. And they are taken with this man not for his political stand, but for his grace under suffering. That his faith has not wavered in a God who has not yet removed the thorn of cancer from his flesh. Are you listening? Sometimes our prayer needs to change from God bless me to God use me. And not after you give me what I need and want, then God use me. No, sometimes when you're in want and you're in need, God's greatest message, his power, flows through you. That's what Paul is saying. And when you think about it, that's what happened with Jesus. On the cross, the power of our redemption, our salvation, and our ransom was paid. He had to go to the cross and through the cross to purchase our salvation, our eternity. What pain and unresolved trial or test are you going through now? As hard as it is, with Senator Harimoto as an example, pray everything like Paul did about God heal me, God help me, but also from where you are, pray God use me. Because there's somebody out there who needs the encouragement and connection you can give them because you're going through something similar. Think about that. That's so redemptive. I've had 2 colonoscopies. What a transition. How many of you have had colonoscopies? Okay, some people are like, it's okay. Hey, it's all right, man. Some of you are looking at me like, what's a colonoscopy? It's like, who's LeBron James? Colonoscopy, I'll Google it. Not now, but later. It's where they stick stuff up your you-know-where to clean out your you-know-what. I've had 2 of them. My first one, when I went in after doing all the prep, because you got to clean your system out, you got to drink what looks like car oil, get yourself cleaned out. I remember laying down. The nurse came to me. She was, I would say, about several years older than I was. Because they say you should start having colonoscopies from when you're 50. Okay, so I'm lying there, and look, I don't like anything done to my body, all right? Nothing. And what they're going to do is like unsightly. She goes, Norman, I'm here to tell you you've done all the work necessary. You've done a great job. She was so soothing. She really was. And we have it from here. You're going to go to sleep. You'll feel nothing. And when you get up, poof, it will be gone. And you will feel as if nothing has happened. You'll feel brand new. I felt so soothed. I thought, yes. And then I said, nurse, when was yours? She said, oh no, I haven't had one. There went all the poof and the soothing. and then I woke up thinking I wanted to ask her another question. She said, it's done. I said, what do you mean it's done? No, you've been out for 30 minutes. I said, really? But here's the question that was in my mind. How can you work here and help administer colonoscopies but not have had one yourself? Right? So empathy, I appreciated. She put herself in my shoes. Compassion, however, was a bit shorthanded because she hadn't really gone through the gutting process. But God honors empathy. God honors the effort you and I make to get alongside someone who's lost their husband or their wife, their son or their daughter. Just because we haven't gone through it doesn't mean God's power can't flow through us. We talked about Senator Harimoto. In 2007, I went through a big cancer scare that lasted about a month. For those of you who haven't heard the story, because we have new people every week, briefly let me summarize. I was going through just a regular operation to remove what looked like a benign lump on my hand. They forgot to anesthetize me totally, so I heard the conversation of the surgeons as they were operating on my hand. It was horrifying because they talked about how I might die, that it looked like cancer of the bone, and we may have to amputate either his fingers, his hand, or his arm, or if it's in his bone, he doesn't have a chance. Now, that's your worst nightmare. You see this in movies. So I want to get up from what is like a bad dream, but I can't. And then when I get up, they're kind of sugarcoating everything. And I tell them, I heard everything. The anesthesiologist went, you should have, if there was a word for cover up, that was it. Because that's a lawsuit. So for a month, they did a biopsy, tried to go in again. They said, it's too risky. We're just going to have to wheel you in and take the chance. And if it is malignant, by the time we go in there, it'll metastasize because we have to go that deep. This is a crapshoot. Excuse the language. So I've told the story before. Team of people around me. This time, they're ready to take stuff off of my body. And of course, I have two arms. I'm alive. I'm breathing. In the uncertainty of that, I was the chaplain of the University of Hawaii football team. And Coach June Jones pulled me into his office, closed the door, and began to give me a dissertation on cancer, healing, and prevention. With such passion and compassion, he began to encourage me. And I thought to myself, this is not the football coach I'm familiar with. And then, you have the question, where is this drive coming from? He began to share with me how his wife had stage 4 cancer. It didn't look good. The year was 1996, so he took a year off from coaching in the National Football League to see her healing through. I don't think that he even recognized the hope and the encouragement, the energy and the juice that he gave me to get through 30 days of hell and not knowing. Where did that come from? Maybe he didn't have it himself, but he helped his wife through it. And through prayer and compassion and care and connection with others, the Lord healed her. This is the picture of Diane and June's son, Juner. Let's throw that up right now. This is last year. We were having a meal at Zippy's. And when I looked at them, I realized, had not the Lord healed Diane, both she and her son, June's son, wouldn't be alive. But because of their story, her story, Coach was able to give me compassion, connection that gave me hope for my journey. Last week, or 10 days ago, I was able to tell my story to one of our primary leaders in our church who went through a biopsy because he was told that he probably may have cancer. And there was emotion in the room and concern. All I did was pass on the encouragement I received to him. And he said, "You cannot imagine the help it has been for me. We don't know what the results are." But I looked at him and I leaned to him. I says, "Listen to me. They told me from what they saw, this is 1 in 1,000 if it's not cancer. And if it is, you're in trouble." When the results came in, knowing God's in control, he looked at me and he says, "Well, we can't explain it, but it's not cancer. Here's the tumor in a Tupperware." He threw it at me, which I didn't want, really. And he says, "It's 1 in 1,000. It's not." Here's where my mind went. Thank you, Coach Jones, for that 1 hour you took to encourage me because you understood what it felt like. So when I'm having lunch with them at Zippy's, I'm reminded. I looked at Diane eating her oatmeal and fruits, and I looked at Juner, her son, June's son, eating waffles and bacon. That's the generational difference. So people ask you, why are you so skinny and muscular today? Because I want to stay healthy. And here's another reason why. When I heard Coach talk to me about supplements and stuff you should eat and not eat, it stuck with me to this day. And every time I take some of those supplements, I think of Coach June Jones because he took the time to give me hope when it was scary. We can be that for somebody. Why do we go through what we go through? And I've told this story to you, Senator Harimono. It's to help others get through what they're going through. May I suggest this also, that sometimes our breakthrough won't come till we help someone else get through what they're going through. Because what we're going through, and the reason we're going through what we're going through, is not because God doesn't know it. It's not because He doesn't want to bless us, answer our prayer, and heal us. It's because He wants to use us to help others. And when that is done, I find so often God brings a breakthrough for others who understand the thorn in my flesh was for something beyond me. That's why Jesus had to go through what He went through. Jesus went through what He went through. It's called crucifixion for us. Because we can't save ourselves. We can't save ourselves. Now, let's close with this. Pain is often the pathway to a greater purpose. So I look in this room right now. All of you are on a journey. You have pain and unresolved tensions and trials and tribulations, and your life is in process. It may be you, your children, your spouse, your job, your boss. It may be your health. It may be your finances. It's not that God has forgotten about you. It's not that God is not in control. But you're going through what you're going through partly because you're supposed to help others go through what they're going through. And until we make that connection to the grander purpose, things may not change. So Paul writes, if we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. And if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. Our hope for you is unshaken, for we know that as you share in our sufferings, you will also share in our comfort. That's pretty clear. Paul knew that he was going through what he was going through to help others get through what they were going through. He understood the greater good. He pens in the book of Romans, all things work together for good. All things. You say, wait a minute. Even though it feels like bad things, he says all things. All things work together for good. But it's the perspective that we have. We just finished a series on great faith. And faith realizes that God can use all things and cause all things to work together for good. It's just if we think that God exists for us to meet our need and to bless us, we'll be frustrated with him when he doesn't give us what we think we need and want when we need it and when we want it. But God is not a genie. God is after forming in us the character of Christ to make us salt and light in the world, but not people that cannot relate to other people's pain. He's made us to connect so that others can experience God and his power through relationships. Paul had to learn this the hard way. He had to receive prayer from an unknown guy named Ananias to reclaim his sight when God confronted him on the road to Damascus. He had to be discipled by an unknown guy named Barnabas. Paul had to understand it's just not me, myself, and God. I have to let others in so the power of God can come through them. That's why we build church on small groups. It is why that community of faith is so important, because God puts us in groups because there are people that at some point in our journey and in their story will have an experience, a prayer, a word that will change our lives because of what we're going through. And they're going to find out they've gone through what they've gone through to help us get through what we're going through. And that's why I implore us to really grasp the fact that this service, as vital as it is incomplete without the discipleship family called Grace Groups. Let us help you find your best fit. I get it. Some people did not even like the group I was leading. That's okay. So Grace Group leaders, don't take it personally. Don't internalize that. All right? I'm starting a new group fairly soon. Can I just talk to you about a couple of our pastors here? Pastor Camille Olmo, everybody adores her. Is she on vacation right now? Anyway, Pastor Camille is our senior women's pastor. She's our lead women's pastor. And when we look at Pastor Camille Olmo, and for those of you that are new, she's like, everybody loves Camille. She's like our version of Mother Teresa. Protestant version. Leads our prayer ministry, covers a bunch of groups, prays for the sick, casts demons out. It's like she needs a cape and she'll start flying, okay? But people don't understand. She's grown up from childhood in an abusive past. Walked through a broken marriage, but through those experiences received the power of God that began to transform her life and define her call. What's interesting is before she was a pastor on our staff, she was a hospital administrator. She was a patient relations administrator at one of Hawaii's leading hospitals. Well, that's a lousy job from the standpoint is you have to tell all the families who's lost loved ones or whose loved ones are in bad shape, you have to be the one to tell them. And you have to be the one to comfort them. And you have to be the one to deal with lawsuits. And you have to be the one to deal with the bad news. And the bad news always outweighed the good news. But here's what happens. For Pastor Camille to do that job, she had to put herself in the patient's place. She couldn't stay there and say, well, on behalf of the hospital, it wasn't our fault. She had to step out from where she was, step into where they were feeling the pain and minister comfort. And she did that for many years. And they didn't want to give her a promotion, at which time we said, we'd like to offer you a job. Here's one of the reasons why. There came a day when all of it boiled up inside of her. The year was 1995, and it was a day they lost patients they felt like they shouldn't have. So much pain and so much grief. And then a 52-year-old Hawaiian man died on the table undergoing angioplasty, a routine procedure. And something of compassion and indignation rose up in Pastor Camille. She wasn't Pastor Camille back then, just Camille. She heard the Lord say, pray for him, I'm going to raise him up. So she did. You know the story. Those of you that are members, you know the story. Those of you that are new, you need to hear the story. So put a long story short, he was dead an hour. She prayed for him. He came back to life, stunning the doctors, causing KGMB to call me, wanting to put us on television. And I was going, what the heck are you guys talking about? What hospital? We only have 80 people in our church. You must be talking about New Hope, Wayne Cordero. My middle name is Wayne, I said. My first name is Norman. Okay, we have 80 people. He's got 2,500 people. Okay, it must be that. He's, no. You have a woman named Camille. Omo. I went, yeah, that's right. But I didn't really know her close yet. And I says, look, we want to do an interview, so forth and so on. So I get over to the hospital, and my first question was, Camille, what did you do? What did you do? Because I'm trying to piece the things together. I get up to the room. I walk into the room. The whole family is there. And I've told the story before, but new ones, here's what I said. The first thing I noticed was there was the guy that was dead for an hour who said he saw Jesus, saw heaven. Okay. Never been to church before. It's rare in America. And he was eating mahi-mahi white rice and macaroni salad. I know that, and this is the part I've never told before. It was about lunchtime, and I was hungry, and I think mac salad is the main dish. With a little bit shoyu on that, it's perfect. Tabasco, that'll really top it off, right? And they were like, this. I talked to the surgeon. He says, he wouldn't use the miracle word. He says, we don't use that word, but it is confounding. He says, more confounding is this, that he's eating. Generally speaking, he says, a person who hasn't been dead for an hour doesn't eat. You don't need a college degree for that. Second thing, he says, is he doesn't have any, we tested him, he doesn't seem to have any brain damage or loss of cognition, except the part where he's talking about having seen heaven. That's why he's there. That's the real part. In my mind, I was like, doctor, you need to see some stuff. Well, a week later, he shows up in our church and receives Christ and tells the all whopping 82 people on Mother's Day. We had a huge turnout. What he saw, most of those seeds coming from the book of Revelation. Now, why am I telling this story? Everything Pastor Camille had grown up with, all of the pain, all of the suffering, all of the disappointment, all of those years having to put herself in the shoes of suffering patients and their families caused compassion and indignation to rise up into action. And she said to the dead man, get up! Sorry. Terrence, is that your daughter? I'm so sorry. Yeah. You know, we have consultants that come tell us about being smooth with people because guests don't like when you get like that. So if you're a seeker, guess you're invited. I'm not always like this, but Jesus did do stuff like this occasionally. And that compassion is emotion. And he lived. And over the next 6 months, our church went from 80 to 300 people by word of mouth because they discovered God really moves like that today. See, but the Pastor Camille we know has been formed by pain. And you can blame God for your pain, or you can, like Paul, say, I learn to be content wherever I am because God has a greater purpose, a greater grander purpose. I'm looking at my son-in-law, Pastor Billy here. The top two leaders in the church, Pastor Paris and Pastor Billy Lyle. They're my right arms. He's also my son-in-law, but he knows full well I'm a pretty objective guy. I don't play favorites. We're professionals on our staff. But Pastor Billy, everybody looks at him, I hear that, hey, Pastor Billy, he's so handsome. He's so good. You should have him preach at 9:15. I hear it all, okay? I hear it all. And I'm fine with that, okay? Trust me, I'm preparing them to far exceed me. But they think, at first glance, that he had a charmed life growing up. He's the only child in a broken family where his father was in prison. He grew up mostly without his dad. And when you look at him today, you go, well, wow, he married your girl. He's got a beautiful family. Well, what makes him able to be a pastor and preach the Word of God is a humanity that has been formed through a lifetime of being formed in suffering and pain and adversity. He could have blamed God, or he could come to God and let that draw him close to the Lord, which is what he chose to do. Of course, he also drew close to my daughter. And so that went together with drawing close to God, and he has a different story than I do about that, and I don't really care because God knows, and Billy and I will settle that in heaven. Not on earth, okay? You say, your staff, listen, my pastoral staff, whom I'm extremely proud of, has been formed by pain. Because if they haven't suffered and gone through adversities, they couldn't relate to you. They couldn't relate to the people we're trying to love who are far from God, who are searching and hurting and seeking. So the merit badge that qualifies us to be here is pain. We are not disavowed from or disconnected to what you go through. It's the reason why Jesus had to come and be made like us to suffer for us. And in doing so, become the high priest who through empathy, compassion, can have mercy and give his life. So, and then you said the picture. We showed the picture of Billy and his dad. And then this is the dad that he didn't grow up with. Today, they're fully reconciled. He's a far better grandpa than I can. He's trying to be the best dad and grandpa he can be now, because when he went to prison, it's because William Lyle himself grew up in an abusive past. He grew up in a past that you wouldn't want. And his journey, you see, some of you look at me like, no, he's so nice. He's so pastoral. He's our operations director. Yeah, but you have no idea. Then he went to prison, which he didn't want to go to. But he says the best thing for him, because in the pain of prison, I met God, and God began to change me, and he began to use other people to change me. He says, you really change when you have these big guys lay their hands on you. I said, we're going to pray for you, okay? It's stuff like that. It's letting them in. And so now we have father and son, because I don't want to throw William under the bus at all. But here's the deal. Then Billy has a son. His name's Micah, who just made 10. Everybody say 10. Remember when you were 10? No, you don't remember when you were 10. Okay, because that's the only birthday party I ever had in my whole life, is when I was 10. And so Micah's born, and about 3 years, when he's about 3 years old, he sustains a skin condition that no one can figure out. So he literally scratches himself into a frenzy and bleeds almost every night. He has very little sleep for 3 years. And Billy and Naomi go through a very confusing season. But here's God at work. Billy has to actually have his son lie on him and soothe him while dealing with the wounds and the cuts and everything else, and pray for him while reading his word, reading the Bible to him, cheating with a little Facebook. And it's bonded them. So there's a father and son relationship. It's like, I'm going to give my son now the experience from God I never had when I was growing up. See how God's working? And then, after 3 years, the Lord heals him. So Billy has a choice. He can shake his fist at God, or he can say, I'm going to receive all the help I can from others so my son and myself can receive a touch from God. Your trial, your pain, your journey, that's not forever. But here's what the Lord is doing. He's watching to see how you respond along the way. You could make the path of suffering longer, or you can keep it right there in God's time frame, knowing that God is using pain to forge a deeper purpose. Now, this is Micah about 3 years ago, And he's being trained here. No, that wasn't 3 years ago. That was last year. They won a championship. He's smaller than most kids. He can't eat what most kids eat because of his skin condition. Okay, so when you look at him, he's smaller than most kids his age, and he can't enjoy a lot of the things that normal children can. It's the truth. As a grandfather, it's pained me. I've cried private tears about this. But this is about 3 years ago. He loves basketball. And we know there will be basketball in heaven because it's a holy sport. Let's take a look at the video. Shoot the video. Shoot the video. Okay, this is Derek Lowe, this is 3 years ago. Okay, not bad, right? For a little tyke. All right. See that? See those moves? Steph Curry moves? Yes, sir. Now, here's the connection. Derek Lowe has started a business, a sports business, to equip young people with athletic skills. And he heard the Lord say to start that business sitting right there. Heard the Lord say. He gave him the name, the plan, just as he was sitting there. Amazing things happen when you actually listen to the sermon. And God just laid out his next life. Here's what he does. Derek Lowe was abandoned by his birth parents. He had a father named Kenneth, who's going to be in my new group, and a mother. The mother, they've told this story here publicly on Father's Day 3 years ago. Mother cheated, had an affair with a drug dealer. Derek was conceived. They didn't want Derek, so he was abandoned. Kenneth, the man who was violated in the marriage covenant, said, I will adopt Derek and raise him. Everybody told him, don't do it. You're not equipped to do it. He says, I have to do it. It's right to do. I met with Ken. His name's Ken. I said, Ken, why did you adopt Derek? He says, well, I was adopted. See where that comes from? He says, I know what a rejection feels like. And I am not going to let that boy, though he's a product of an affair somebody had with my wife, I'm not going to give that boy up to a foster home over my dead body. Compassion, connection. Why do we go through what we go through? It's to help others go through what they go through. It's not forever. There will be a resolution. Keep the faith. Let the Lord draw you close. Let the Lord use you to draw others close to Him. Because guess what happens? When you let the Lord use you and what you're going through to help others, God draws close to you. Because it's all about relationships. Jesus said, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And in all of that, all the commandments are summarized. For some of you, God is waiting for you just to do. He's waiting for you to change your prayer from God bless me to God use me. He's waiting for the prayer to change from God heal me of this pain, this trial, this test to God use me and what I'm going through to help others get through what they're going through. It's redemptive. Totally redemptive. Jesus had to become, as fully God, He had to become fully man and fully suffer to connect with us, to be that high priest. I close with this scripture. Since therefore the children shall share in flesh and blood, this is the Apostle Paul, who I still believe wrote the book of Hebrews. He himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of the devil, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. Jesus could not evade death. He could not evade the cross and pain. Therefore, he had to be made like his brothers, connection, compassion, identification in every respect, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God to make propitiation or covering for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Paul's pain connected him to God, but through others. Ananias, who's that? Praying for him to regain his sight. Who the heck is Barnabas? Paul was not used to this humility, but that's how he experienced the power of God. And God's pain in the same way is meant to connect us. Our pain, God wants to use to connect us to Him, to draw us close to Him, but also He wants us to get into other people's lives in the midst of our pain and bring God close to them. And when you help, when you're going through what you're going through, other people to get through what they're going through, you ultimately get what I call a breakthrough.